At 04:07 hours, the Gulf went still in the most unnatural way. Not calm, not peaceful, just waiting. And every bridge watch in the US formation knew the same truth. If Iran didn't back down in the next few minutes, the next messages would be missiles. The pre-dawn sky was a low ceiling of gray cloud, starless and heavy. A northwest wind at 16 knots scraped across the sea, chopping the surface into short, hard crests that slapped hull plating and turned wake lines into broken white stitches. Humidity hung at 86%, beating on antenna housings and fogging optics the moment a lens cap came off. Visibility was 6 nautical miles toward open water and less than 4 toward the Iranian coastline, where dust haze and shore glow smeared the horizon into a faint orange bruise. And in that haze, on multiple US scopes, the same pattern kept flashing. Coastal emitters tightening, fast craft stirring, and a single warship holding position like a dare. I'm your host at US Defense Watch, where we break down the operations shaping global security, and what happened when Iran finally backed down after the US Navy surged warships for a massive strike wasn't just another show of force. It was a wake-up call for any fleet that thinks threats can replace capability, and for any commander who forgets that in modern naval warfare, hesitation is a consumable you run out of fast. This was a confrontation built on timing and posture, not a single explosive moment. Iran's move began with a restricted maritime safety operation declaration and ended with a silent retreat when the US built an unmistakable strike package over the water and made the decision space disappear. The aggressor was Iran, operating from the Persian Gulf littoral with a layered denial posture. Shore-based anti-ship missiles, coastal radar nodes, electronic warfare coverage, and fast inshore attack craft designed to swarm and confuse. The vessel type at the center of Iran's gamble was a missile-capable surface combatant acting as a forward command node. A Mauj-class frigate holding 27 knots on a tight coastal arc, supported by patrol boats running 40 to 47 knots in bursts. The location was the Persian Gulf near the Strait of Hormuz approaches, where lanes compress and where one wrong move can freeze global shipping. The US response centered around deliberate escalation control. A surface action group pushed forward as a hard fist, while a larger strike group held depth behind it, ready to convert posture into destruction if Iran crossed the line. At 04:09 hours, the first US command net update went out across the formation. Hostile posture trending. Coastal radars tightening. Small craft surge possible. Maintain defense posture. Stand by for strike option. That message wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. Every sailor in that net understood what strike option meant. Target packets ready, aircraft armed, and a plan built to hit multiple nodes fast enough that the shoreline wouldn't recover in time to answer. Iran was counting on uncertainty. Counting on the fact that the Gulf is crowded and politically sensitive. Counting on the idea that the US Navy would avoid decisive action in a lane full of civilian traffic and global cameras. But Iran's posture was not subtle anymore. At 04:11 hours and 22 seconds, electronic support measures aboard the forward Arleigh Burke-class destroyer lit with a change in pattern. Coastal fire control behavior, not just search. Emitter tightening, bearing 053, range estimate 41 nautical miles. The EW officer called, possible weapons quality track attempt. At 04:11 hours and 39 seconds, the second destroyer in the screen reported movement along the coast. Multiple small surface contacts departing inlet, bearing 049, range 23 miles, speed 42 knots. At 04:11 hours and 51 seconds, the E-2D Advanced Hawkeye overhead confirmed the picture and tightened the fuse track set. Confirmed. Surface contacts are fast craft. Coastal emitters trending toward targeting. Shooter platform likely Mauj class, holding outside clutter at range 51 miles. The key phrase was shooter platform, because in a strike group, you do not treat threats as vibes, you treat them as sources. Iran's coastal commanders were trying to build a moment, the kind of moment that can be broadcast as US fleets forced to withdraw. They had already pushed shipping into hesitation with warnings and ambiguous mine fear. They had already raised the political temperature. Now they wanted the fleet to blink. Instead, the fleet prepared to punch. What they didn't know was that the US Navy had already been tracking the aggressor for 96 hours using surveillance assets. The dossier began days earlier with satellite imagery that showed unusual generator staging near coastal missile sites, compressed fueling windows for fast craft, and movement patterns consistent with coordinated readiness drills rather than routine patrol. A P-8 Poseidon operating in broad maritime patrol lanes built the surface pattern of life and tagged small craft behavior profiles. Signals intelligence correlated short, disciplined bursts on coastal tactical nets with specific nodes, command relays, radar sites, and likely battery control points. Undersea cueing and acoustic analysis flagged abnormal small craft movement and the absence patterns that often precede mine activity. So when Iran tightened its coastal posture on this morning, the US did not interpret it as a surprise. It interpreted it as the start of a known script. At 0413 hours, the US commander authorized the next phase, the visible buildup that makes backdown possible. A surface action group of warships moved forward into a defined operating box, deliberately inside a range band that made their presence unavoidable but still defensible. The group included 3 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers and a Ticonderoga-class cruiser. The destroyers formed a wedge designed for mutual support and overlapping missile defense arcs. The cruiser held slightly aft to coordinate air defense and strike timing, acting as the brain that could turn contact reports into weapon releases without friction. Overhead, aircraft built the lid. FA-18 East moved into combat air patrol stations. EA-18G Growlers established electronic warfare orbits to watch the coast and to be ready to blind any fire control attempt. The Hawkeye maintained the composite picture, feeding data links so every ship saw the same truth. At 0416 hours and 08 seconds, a US destroyer broadcast a warning on maritime guard, steady and formal. Iranian naval units operating in the vicinity of the Strait of Hormuz. This is United States Navy. You are directed to cease unsafe behavior. Maintain separation from coalition vessels. Any weapons quality targeting or hostile action will be met with immediate response. No reply came in words. Iran replied with movement. At 0416 hours and 37 seconds, the Iranian frigate increased speed from 27 to 30 knots and altered course to keep itself inside coastal clutter while still holding a line that threatened the US forward wedge. The small craft cluster surged again, speeds climbing into the mid-40s, their wakes cutting angles that suggested rehearsal. At 0417 hours, the US stopped waiting for intent to become impact. The formation shifted into a posture that changes the adversary's math. Strike ready, not just defensive. On the forward destroyers, the combat system posture changed. Target sets loaded, shot doctrine active, weapons assigned, execution sequences rehearsed on live tracks. On the cruiser, strike packages were built against 7 key Iranian nodes: radar sites, electronic warfare emitters, a coastal missile battery complex, 2 command relays, and a fast craft staging inlet. The targets weren't chosen for drama, they were chosen for effect. Remove the eyes, remove the comms, remove the launch control. At 0419 hours and 12 seconds, the Hawkeye called a critical change. Coastal fire control illumination sustained, duration increasing. This is a lock attempt. In plain language, Iran was trying to create a weapons quality solution. That is the moment the rules change. Because a lock is not a press statement. It is the beginning of a kill chain. At 0419 hours and 26 seconds, the US commander delivered the line that removed ambiguity. If they hold it, we hit it. At 0420 hours, the US executed the show portion of the strike, the piece designed to force Iran to back down without forcing the US to shoot first. Growlers pushed forward and began controlled jamming in narrow cones over the suspected fire control bands. Not broad noise, surgical disruption, enough to degrade Iran's ability to lock without creating a visible act that could be framed as a kinetic strike. Within seconds, the coastal emission quality degraded. At 0420 hours and 41 seconds, the EW console confirmed it. Lock behavior disrupted, emission wobble, reduced track quality. But Iran didn't stop. It adjusted. At 0421 hours and 08 seconds, a second coastal node illuminated. Different band, different pattern, trying to rebuild the firing solution. The US had prepared for that too. At 0421 hours and 22 seconds, Growlers shifted. Jamming followed the new emitter like a shadow. The Hawkeye confirmed the effect. The destroyers maintained full missile defense posture. Phalanx CYWS spun, RIM 116 RAM indexed, medium-range interceptors ready, decoy systems armed. The fleet was not only threatening, it was protected. Iran's commanders now faced a collapsing choice. They could keep pushing and risk being struck, or they could back down and lose face. They had built their strategy around the idea that the US would avoid striking shore nodes because of escalation. Now the US had made it clear. Escalation was already being managed, and the strike plan existed whether Iran liked it or not. At 0423 hours, the US made the strike threat undeniable. A Tomahawk launch posture message moved through the fleet. Target packets were finalized. Time on target windows were calculated. The phrase "massive strike" was not a headline. It was a plan. Simultaneous hits on multiple nodes designed to collapse Iran's coastal ability to coordinate any meaningful response. From the Iranian perspective, the atmosphere changed instantly. Their commanders had expected warnings and slow diplomacy. Instead, they saw a formation that had built the kill chain while remaining defensive. They saw aircraft overhead and warships arranged like a blade. They saw that the US could fire and keep firing, not just once, because its strike architecture was deep. And then another fear arrived, the submarine layer. Because even if Iran tried to answer with fast craft or a submarine probe, the US had quiet coverage below. In a tight waterway, undersea surprises are the fastest way to escalate. The US made sure Iran understood it had no safe layers. At 0425 hours and 17 seconds, the Iranian frigate slowed. From 30 knots to 24, then to 18, then to 12. It was not a breakdown, it was a decision. 2 minutes later, the small craft cluster peeled back toward the coast, their speed falling as they moved inside the clutter line. The coastal emitters went silent in sequence, not all at once, but with the unmistakable pattern of a commander ordering systems to shut down. At 0429 hours, the Hawkeye confirmed what everyone wanted to hear. Coastal emitters down, first, fast craft retreating. Shooter platform turning north, threat posture de-escalating. Iran was backing down. But the US did not relax. De-escalation in the Gulf is often a pause, not an end. At 0430 hours, the Surface Action Group held its box, maintaining spacing and defense posture. The carriers in the broader formation maintained flight cycles and continued to generate air patrols. The US didn't back away immediately, because backing away too fast invites the next test. It held. It made the backdown feel permanent. At 0434 hours, the US issued the final message that locked the outcome into the record. Iranian naval units, this is United States Navy. Your unsafe behavior has been observed and recorded. Maintain separation. Do not re-illuminate coastal fire control. Any renewed hostile posture will be met with immediate response. Iran did not reply. It did not need to. The backdown was visible in the only language the sea respects: motion and silence. The outcome of the confrontation was not a missile intercept or a ship on fire. It was the removal of Iran's coercion window. Iran had attempted to weaponize uncertainty, to freeze traffic, to threaten the fleet, to force a political moment, and the US had responded by presenting a strike package so heavy and so ready that the window closed. The US maintained superiority in every layer: surface, warships in a wedge with overlapping sectors. Air, Hawkeyes, fighters, and growlers shaping the picture. Electromagnetic, jamming used as denial, not panic. Strike, target packets built for simultaneous effect. Defense, CIWS, RAM, interceptors, decoys ready across the screen. Undersea, quiet coverage denying surprise. And most importantly, the US owned the timeline. Iran tried to create a story of control. The US turned it into a story of consequence. The lesson is sharp. Modern naval power is not only the ability to fire first. It is the ability to make the other side believe you will fire second, and that second will arrive fast enough to feel like the first. When a fleet can build a strike plan, defend itself while building it, and present it clearly enough that the adversary backs down without a shot, that fleet is not just strong, it is decisive. And in the Persian Gulf at 0407 hours, Iran learned what decisive looks like. Warships positioned for a massive strike, a kill chain already built, and no room left to hide behind warnings or safety operations. Iran backed down. The corridor stayed open. At 0501 hours, the strike group ran the quiet checks that decide whether a backdown was real or staged. The Hawkeye maintained its orbit. The Growlers held at a measured distance, ready to reapply disruption if coastal radars lit again. Destroyers logged emitter behavior changes and stored raw electronic data to prevent later denial. Surface tracks were maintained at high fidelity so no fast craft could pivot back into an approach lane unnoticed. At 0518 hours, a P-8 Poseidon confirmed the coastal staging inlets had gone quiet. Vehicle movement on the roads near the suspected battery complexes slowed to routine patterns. The frigate that had held the line earlier was now inside a defensive coastal arc, speed down, avoiding open water, not because it was damaged, but because it had been ordered to stop testing. At 0533 hours, commercial traffic resumed its cautious forward motion. The first tanker to enter the lane transmitted a simple sentence that sounded like relief. Proceeding under escort, thank you. That was the final proof. Iran could threaten, Iran could posture, but it could not hold the lane when a fleet decided the lane would stay open. And that is the real meaning of a massive strike posture. It is not a desire to destroy. It is the ability to destroy so credibly that destruction becomes unnecessary. At 0602 hours, the final confirmation arrived in the oldest naval language, routine. Watch rotations resumed. Radar sectors stayed hot, but voices softened. The fleet did not celebrate. It did not need to. It had enforced the simplest rule on the world's most dangerous water. The lane stays open when the stronger navy decides it does. At 0619 hours, the fleet's work shifted from confrontation to deterrence maintenance, because the most expensive mistake after a backdown is assuming it means the problem is over. The US commander kept the surface action group inside the same box for another full cycle, not to provoke, but to make the Iranian choice feel locked in. He understood the psychology. If Iran could claim the Americans immediately retreated, the test would return tomorrow. If Iran saw the Americans hold, the lesson would stick. The Hawkeye continued to feed the fused picture, tracking every fishing contact in every merchant hull so the next fast craft surge could not hide behind civilian clutter. Growlers maintained a relaxed orbit with weapons cold, but sensors hot, waiting for the telltale moment when coastal fire control radars might light up again. On the destroyers, the air defense teams ran a steady rhythm. Verify track libraries, confirm data link integrity, rehearse the intercept sequence, and keep the close-in systems ready. A supersonic sea skimmer is a fast problem, but it is not a surprise problem when your posture never drops. At 0647 hours, a P-8 Poseidon updated the picture with the kind of detail that ends arguments later. Vehicle movement near 2 known coastal sites had ceased, support trucks were returning to garrison, and the earlier fast craft cluster was now dispersed into small groups inside protected littoral pockets. It wasn't an accident, it was an order. At 0703 hours, commercial traffic flow normalized. The lane did not surge all at once. Captains are conservative when the sea has been threatened, but the queue began moving with disciplined spacing. Tankers resumed safe speed. Container ships recovered schedule where they could. The radios on maritime guard sounded less like panic and more like routine again. That is how you know coercion has failed. Not when the enemy says it has failed. When the world stops behaving like it believes the enemy. The final lesson of the morning was the one naval professionals never forget. A strike you do not execute can still win the fight if it is credible, immediate, and backed by layered defense. Iran did not back down because of a speech. Iran backed down because a strike package was built in real time. A kill chain was demonstrated without firing, and every layer of the US force showed it could absorb a first move and still punish the second. In the Gulf, that is what prevents war more reliably than hope. A posture that leaves the other side with only one safe choice. At 0728 hours, the US commander finally allowed the box to loosen, but not to disappear. Ships adjusted stations by miles, not by horizons. Aircraft rotated, not withdrew. The message remained. The sea is watched, the lane is protected, and the next attempt will be met faster than the last.